and welcome to the latest episode of the Wednesday's Child podcast. I did drop online a few days ago and said that we would be returning with our podcast episodes because I know how much the community has been telling me that you've really missed them and how helpful they are, whether you yourself are experiencing an eating disorder or you're someone that's reaching out for help, advice and insight because you have somebody in your family or perhaps your friendship group who is going through an eating disorder. So we're going to kick off today with an opportunity to talk to you about our forthcoming parent and carer support group, which is coming back this May, but also just a brilliant opportunity for me to catch up with Sarah Parker, who's one of my favourite therapists in the whole world, and she's a massive asset to the Wednesday's Child community. And I just want to use this as an opportunity for us to reintroduce the organisation of Wednesday's Child to you while having a conversation with Sarah and just finding out a little bit more about here we are in 2025. It's been several months since we were regularly communicating via podcast on to you as the community, and therefore just doing a bit of a sense check. What are we seeing? What are we noticing? What are we experiencing around the healthcare system and people coming forward with their own anecdotes? Is there any change? Is it positive? Is it negative? And is there more work that needs to be done? So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Sarah to the podcast. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Debbie. It's really lovely to be back with you again. And I'm so looking forward to the support group and working with you again on that.
Yeah, me too. And we've deliberately said, haven't we, that it's not just for parents, it's for anybody that classes themselves in some ways as a carer. But it could be a partner, couldn't it? It could be a spouse, it could be even a sibling. And
yeah, it could be a friend.
Absolutely. And do you think there are sometimes that label of carer? Do you think one of the problems we have is that actually people find it difficult to refer to themselves as a carer, but actually if you are living with or regularly in contact with and trying to aid someone in eating disorder recovery, you are doing a real heavy lift?
Yeah, I think to support anybody, to support and care for anybody in whatever capacity with an eating disorder, it's not easy. And there's a lot of areas that we can get it wrong. There's a lot of areas that we can think, oh, that wasn't great. But actually, I think that caring role, that having somebody there beside you when you're struggling with an eating disorder is so central for people. And I think the fact that maybe we get it wrong sometimes is less important than we can learn, and that we're there with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be talking about all those aspects about things to say, things to do. Again, there's no perfect recipe, unfortunately, is there? Because everybody's different and recovery isn't linear. And we're hoping that people that come to the group online once a month will be bringing all their anecdotes and experiences. Some people will be very new to dealing with an eating disorder in their home or family life, and others will have, dare I say it, have been living with it in a kind of severe and enduring capacity that it may have gone on for years and years.
Absolutely. And I think everybody is so different, Debbie, as you say. There is no easy way. And I think this is not a space. It goes without saying that you can come and you can say, oh, that didn't go well, because there is no shame in sometimes saying things that aren't helpful, because it's in the trying to support. And in learning what isn't helpful, we also start to learn what is helpful. And I think that's what the space is about. It's about everybody's welcome. All of what happens is welcome, without any shame, without any criticism. It's simply about helping each other and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit more about the support group again at the end of the episode. But for now, I want to check in with you, Sarah, and just say, you are a therapist in the space of eating disorders.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's been a while since we've talked on the podcast about who you've been hearing from, how you've been helping them. Any sort of initial reflections and thoughts that really occur to you right now in the world of eating disorder support and treatment?
Well, I think there are two sides. I think there are a lot of good people that are really trying to push forward and make kind of a very person-centered, individualistic approach happen. But I think there's also things that aren't going quite according to plan too. And I can admit, Debbie, that I have a biased view, really. I spent a good time working within the NHS in eating disorder services. I now work privately, so I tend to hear most from the people that either have never been served by the NHS or have kind of been failed by treatment. So the people that come to me are often people that won't go back to kind of services or that couldn't get treatment in the first place from services. So I think there are changes, hopefully, to the criteria, but there are still criteria in a lot of services that people that are unwell don't feel like they can be seen in these services because their criteria kind of keeps them out.
So can
And
we talk
that's
about
not
that
okay.
criteria for a bit? I mean, I know historically you and I have talked a lot about the awful BMI rules and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What is that criteria? I mean, it's been a long time since both
Mm.
yourself and myself were patients in this kind of world of
Yeah.
eating disorders. But what does it look like now for somebody to present themselves or their loved one and say, we think this person is affected by an eating disorder? How is that person assessed?
Well, I mean, again, it's 3 years since I left the services or a service where we had criteria. And I do know that that service is changing a little bit, but still, there are a lot of services that don't acknowledge or don't support people who have atypical anorexia, who maybe don't go below a BMI of 17. And I think we both know that an eating disorder is a thinking disorder rather than a physical eating disorder.
Absolutely.
So we have to acknowledge that the thought process for somebody that is above a BMI of 17 can be and often is equally as traumatic and difficult to live with as somebody that has a lower weight that kind of shows the impact physically. The amount, it looks like limitations on people who perhaps don't binge and purge as often as others, and it has to be at a certain level. Very few services offer treatment for people with ARFID or with binge eating disorder. So they're often kind of excluded entirely. The criteria is often for bulimia nervosa and anorexia nervosa.
Yeah, the irony in that is actually what we know statistically
Mm,
is that of people, whole world look at eating disorders,
yeah.
actually anorexia is a minor proportion, isn't it? So that's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we also know that there are people who are neurodivergent are massively overrepresented in the eating disorder world. And often people who are neurodivergent may well present with ARFID. And so there's a whole group of people that are excluded. Now, I know, Debbie, that there are a lot of good people working in eating disorder services. So please don't hear me blaming the people that are working in the services. I think the rules and the restrictions come from funding and come from much higher up, but it's still not okay. So I don't want to just criticize those services, because I think there's a lot of good people trying to do their best work in those services. I just think that the powers that be that make the decisions are not recognizing the struggle for an awful lot of people.
And how do we change that? I mean, you see it day in, day out. Do you find yourself thinking, if only I was back in the system, these are the fundamental things I would do first? I mean,
Yeah.
is it as simple as we've got, maybe GPs, frontline professionals coming into those careers without thorough training and understanding in eating disorders? Do we think some
Yeah.
of that applies?
And I think this is probably some of the difficulty. The need is so huge for kind of education from the top down. I think I myself went to my GP. I had to have an HRT review. I didn't need to go to the GP, but they would only carry on prescribing if I went. And one of the first things that she said to me was, "Oh, you need to lose weight."
Wow.
And I'm fortunate. I'm 18 years post anorexia. I am robust, and I won't let anybody change what I do. and who I am. But I said, well, I'm not going to be going on a diet. My body feels good. I can still do all the things I can do. And my interest is not on what I weigh, it's on how I feel and how I look after my body. And that was okay for a little while. And then she persisted. So you should be eating less of this and more. And, and at that point, actually, even I just thought, oh, I'm just going to let this go because she clearly isn't listening. So we go to the medical kind of services and the health service for help and support. And often, and I'll be honest, Debbie, I came out of there after the second comment experiencing a level of shame in my body that I've not experienced for a long time. Now, it will not make me change what I do and how I treat myself, fortunately, but actually somebody that perhaps is still in the early stages of change or still in an eating disorder, that level of shaming, because that could have been somebody with atypical anorexia. And that level of shaming is so unhelpful. So I think
and we
there's a
know
lot
an
of
eating disorder can lie dormant and then resurface from any
absolutely,
kind of trauma. So a conversation
absolutely,
like that with a GP, or
yeah,
finding themselves pregnant and watching their body change, or going through
yeah,
a death, divorce, whatever it might
yeah,
be, we know that just like any other addiction in the
yeah,
world, if that person has a vulnerability,
yeah,
if they don't at that very time also have the support system,
yeah,
the capacity to understand what they're going
yeah.
through, and the vast professional insight and dogged determination that you do to stay recovered, if they don't, that
Yeah,
spiral
it
is,
really, yeah, it's
it's
dangerous,
just, it's really
dangerous.
fragile.
Yeah. But then, I get my campaigning hat on and I think, right, I want to do some training and I want to make sure people understand this. And then, oh, we've got no money. We've got no money for training and learning. Um, you know, so it's multifactorial, Debbie. I don't think that means that we stop trying. It just
No.
means that it's a complex picture that it's very difficult to find ways in. But I think every tiny bit of education and change that we can offer is helpful.
Exactly.
Um, and it's that advocacy for people that I can advocate for myself now, but some people can't. We've got to find a way of supporting those people as well.
Yeah, just to go back a little bit more over, you talked about neurodiversity. Now, I think perhaps one thing that I think is more of a theme since we first launched our podcast that
Mm,
we perhaps wouldn't even thought to have talked about as a specific
yeah.
topic at the time. Neurodiversity is a major issue, and I know that
Mm.
you've told me previously you see it an awful lot in your private clients.
Yeah, I work a lot with people who are neurodivergent, a lot. Probably the majority of my clients. And that's no mistake that often NHS services aren't making the adaptations that are needed to work with those clients. It's one size fits all, and I get the financial aspect of the need for that, but also it's not helpful. It's not helpful, and I think we really do need to see that, neurodivergent or not, people need a tailored approach that works for them. But simple things like on a ward where, people are overwhelmed by too much noise, by too many people, asking somebody who's neurodivergent to eat in a dining room with a radio on and perhaps 15 other patients,
Yeah.
that's a lot. And if somebody says, I can't do that, at the moment, often the answer is, well, then we can't help you here. And I think, we need to get better at recognizing the picture of neurodivergence and eating disorders. We need to get better at recognizing that in individual treatment, but also in group treatment.
So, can I be a bit of devil's advocate here for the purpose of
Mm,
those that have got their headphones in, listening to this podcast and say, "Oh, neurodiversity, I hear it all the time." How do we identify it as being a an issue in itself
mm,
and alongside an eating disorder, or
mm.
is there a danger of saying, well, these are just behaviors that come with an eating disorder? I guess what I'm saying is, chicken, egg,
Yeah.
are they co-competing? How does that work?
I think there is definitely, even if somebody isn't neurodivergent, there are some thinking styles for anybody, particularly with anorexia nervosa, that are very similar. The black and white thinking, the rigid
Yeah.
thinking. So there is definitely a crossover. But it's very different. And the way I work with it, Debbie, is when I see somebody, whether they are neurodivergent or not, whether that neurodivergence has, whether they've had an assessment and they've had a diagnosis or not. For me, it's about working with whoever presents and what they present with. So it's seeing that person for all of who they are and working with not, oh, this is a problem. Okay, this is how you experience the world. How do we work with that to help you move forward to live a life that matters to you? So, the diagnosis or otherwise isn't as important for me as what's this person's struggle within the eating disorder, but also without of the eating disorder. What are the aspects of perhaps their thinking styles, their emotional experience that are difficult for them, and how do we work with that in a way that serves them?
Yeah, because ultimately the job of a therapist in any form is to ensure that you understand the individual. It's not a one and done, and I'll just rinse repeat with every person, is it? You need to understand whether that person comes in waving a certificate that says they have a particular neurodiversity or not. You are assessing who is this person, what have they been through, what do they bring to the table, so that I can unpick why they might be stuck in this space.
Absolutely. And it's not for me to say you need this, and this. When I work with anybody, we're a team. And okay, this is what I can bring and this is what I see. What do you see? What do you feel that you need? What works for you? What's going to be helpful for you? Because even with a diagnosis, I can have 10 people in my therapy room who have a diagnosis of autism. They'll all be unique and different, just as we all are. So I think we've got to just see people as individuals, but recognize that neurodivergence does bring a flavor that we have to also attend to and work with, so that the person that's in front of us can manage a world that actually often isn't set up for them. And so they've already struggled before the eating disorder because they felt othered. And it's, working on that self-esteem and working on that sense of self and belonging and acceptance in a world that often hasn't given them that.
So is it important that an individual who thinks they are ready to seek help for an eating disorder, is it important in your mind that they are diagnosed or go through the process of getting a diagnosis, and or if there are parents listening to this and they're concerned about their 12-year-old child that is exhibiting behaviours around what we might consider to be ARFID, how vital is it that they get assessed for that? Or do you not think that needs to be a blocker or otherwise to seeking treatment for an eating disorder?
I think it's important if it's important to the person.
Oh, what a great response. Yeah.
Because it's not about whether it's important to me. It's about whether it's important to that person. And I will see some people that actually find a diagnosis really helpful, some people that don't want to seek a diagnosis. But whoever is there with me, I work with what I see. So I may think that somebody is neurodivergent, but and for some people I might suggest it, for other people I won't. But I'll still work with those characteristics and with what their struggles are. So it's about whether it's important for that person.
So interesting. Do you take a particular form of therapy approach? I mean, are you using particular modalities in the way that you conduct your treatment with your patients?
Yes, I mean, I'm trained in certain modalities, and I think that I will adapt that to the person in front of me as well. So, I'm trained in CBT, I'm trained in mantra, I'm trained in ACT, I'm trained in EMDR if there's an element of trauma there. I'm trained in compassion focused therapy. So I think all of those are important. For me, the single most important starting point is compassion.
Yeah.
It's about saying, this is not your fault. This isn't just on you. And creating a space where we can start to form a level of trust and a level of openness where compassion is the antidote to shame. That's how we work with shame. It's about acceptance and belonging and feeling safe enough to be ourselves. And so that's always the starting point for me. And then we will bring in, often I work with ACT. So we'll bring in some values work. We'll bring in some kind of ability to be present, because often our minds are all over the place. Our bodies are always present, but our minds are not often connected to them. So it's about, in a safe and a managed way, connecting to the now, connecting to where our bodies are, and looking at, often our fears and what's created the eating disorder is from the past, but showing up in the present. And it's discerning between the present and the past. But I think I draw on all of these things depending on what's needed at the time.
So one more question for you, as a therapist, and for those who don't know, Sarah, like myself, comes to this space having previously herself experienced an eating disorder.
Yeah.
So in the world of being a therapist, really eager to help as many people as possible recover from their own battle trauma with an eating disorder. How difficult is it to almost put on the shelf your own experiences of an eating disorder, or is it important that they remain present with you in part because of that compassion element?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there will be other people that have a very different approach. And I think for me, it's about being a human being before being a therapist. And in the therapy room, I am very much a human being who is flawed, as we all are, and who has had struggles. Now, that room is not about my struggles from the past. And I'm very fortunate, Debbie, that my struggles are very much past struggles. So I can talk about them without any impact on me anymore, which I am very grateful for, I have to say. So I can bring in some past experience, but I also recognize that my experience might have some similarities, but can also be wildly different from other people's. So it's balancing both. It's saying, there are some nuances within eating disorders that we understand so much differently from having lived it, but also my lived experience is only mine, and somebody else's lived experiences is theirs, and it's recognizing the difference, but also sharing, what, I get this is hard. This is probably the hardest job you'll ever do in terms of recovery. And I can also tell you it's worth it, but I know it's hard. And I know that a lot of what gets in the way is fear. It's not that you're being difficult. It's not that you're being stubborn. It's not that you're belligerent or manipulative. I see that fear. And it's understanding from that level that's so important, I think. But I think, yeah, I come as a human being. And I bring in my therapeutic approach as well.
I think for a lot of people that have experienced an eating disorder, or even for those that care for someone with an eating disorder, it's just about the space to be understood, to be heard, and to allow their voice to share what's going on. Because, as you say, the eating disorder itself is a thinking illness, but the thinking that goes on in the head, in the lonely, isolated head of either the person that's caring for someone, angrily, with frustration, with fear, with utter devastation, often sometimes even with a sense of guilt that's probably wholly unnecessary, but all those emotions for the carer and for the individual, who in their own head is constantly 1 minute ambivalent, 1 minute I'm going to get better, I hate that nobody understands me, all that kind of thing. It's just so important to have that therapy space. And I don't say this, and here I am doing a podcast episode with someone who is a therapist, but I know that there will be people that listen to this that say, oh, I've had therapy, I've done that, it was awful, didn't help me. And all I can say is I completely get if someone just finds they've got another way, and that's great. And particularly if you've got a brilliant support system of friends and family who can keep you on the right path. But I would also say therapy is not one size fits all. It's not you've done therapy 10 years ago with someone who brought up things you didn't want to talk about or whatever. If you haven't found the right therapist, the right style of therapy, keep going if you think there's a slight chance it could help you.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie, because I think that we're very good at saying, to people that don't make change, oh, you're not ready, or, you're
Mm.
not working with us, or you're not, and we put it all back on that person. But we've got to acknowledge that there isn't a one size fits all, as you say. And actually, there's finding the right approach, therapeutic approach, there's finding the right connection with the right human being. And it is not, if therapy hasn't worked once, it doesn't mean to say therapy isn't the right thing. It just means perhaps that experience of therapy wasn't either the right time or the right person or the right approach. I think it's always being open to, we never quite know when we drop a seed, when it will germinate. And I think it's knowing that so long as we keep dropping those seeds in, there will come a time when at least one will start to germinate. We've got to be in the seed dropping game.
That's brilliant. I've never heard the seed dropping game analogy, but I like that. I like that a lot. Sarah, it's been so lovely catching up with you again. So, in the show notes for this episode, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more detail about Sarah if you want to make direct contact with her. I have to tell you, she's the busiest woman in the world, and you can probably tell from this episode why she is so busy. But I'll also be revealing the details, obviously, about our support group, which will be an online monthly scenario for parents and carers to drop in. So a lot more to come about that, and we will be updating you obviously across social media as well. But you'll get to hear plenty from Sarah in our support group sessions and in some other podcast episodes to come over the next weeks and months as well. Thank you so much for listening to us again on the Wednesday's Child podcast. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Debbie, for this space. It's a joy to be here with you.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. And thank you to all those of you who've taken the time to listen. And I wish you nothing more than health, happiness, and hope, because we all need hope. And I hope to see as many of you as possible on the support group in a few weeks' time. That's it for now. We'll be back with another episode very, very soon. Take care.